Hi, it's me, Cooler Jeremy. So you may not know this, but Skin Jeremy teaches music production lessons. He tries to help people with things like hardware setups, modular live sets, song arrangement, and mixing feedback, and all that kind of stuff. Basically, everything that he does in his videos, he can teach a lesson on. He did a video a while back about the basics of getting into electronic music production that lays the groundwork for anyone just getting started with wanting to make music. Usually, when a student approaches him that is just getting started, he'll refer them to this video so they can start getting up on the basics of what music actually is. However, even with the more advanced students, he'll run into questions about music that he learned about more from an intuitive standpoint, which makes them harder to teach. That's when we do research and try to come up with a more formal framework to talk about these things from. So far, we've tackled things like scale modes and the fundamentals of rhythm. Both of these things are things we think you need to know in order to make music. More recently, we did a video on why music commonly works in phrases of 2, 4, 8, and 16, and the like. Today we're covering a topic that's a bit more difficult, and that is melody. Ooh, you hear that? Whatever. What is melody? Where did it come from? How has it developed over time? And what can you do if you're trying to write a melody for yourself? Hopefully, by the end of this video, you'll have a framework to learn more and write better melodies. And hey, I was going to say this later, but I want to make it very, very clear now. The absolutely best way to understand melody is to play along with pieces that you like. Sing with them. Play them on a keyboard, guitar. Pay attention until they become intuitive, and then play around with them. Play around with their structure, their notes, and their rhythm. There is no substitution for this, and there's no quick hack for understanding music in a way that will allow you to make your own. By the way, what do you think of these glasses? I just found them in my avatar, accessories thing. Do they make me look smart, or do I look like a sexy librarian? Those are the two modes that people wearing glasses can be. They can be smart, or they can be sexy librarians. There's nothing in between. Okay, now let's get started. Let's start really basic. What is a melody? Stop it now. Generally, if you're trying to sing something in a song, it's a melody, like Happy Birthday. There are chords involved, but you know the melody. A melody is a series of sounds, not one sound happening in isolation, but many sounds played or sung one after another. Some notes go high, some notes go lower, and sometimes they stay the same. If you drew a line connecting the notes, it would go up and down, creating a unique shape. Just like that. It has rhythm. Some notes are held longer, some are short, and some are quick. This gives the melody its pulse and makes it feel like it's moving forward. I actually find the rhythm of a melody almost more important than the notes themselves changing. An example I always point out to people is Beyoncé's Single Ladies. Listen to how the rhythm is the primary driver in the way this melody moves forward. We change the note itself a lot less than when we sing or play a new note. This is a really, really important aspect of melody. Think of it like this. A single word is like a single note. A sentence is like a melody. No, stop that. A sentence is like a melody. It's a series of words, notes that make sense together and express an idea. The way you say it, your tone of voice, how fast or slow, is like the rhythm and the shape of the melody. When you listen to a song, there's usually one main line that your ear focuses on. That's the melody. All the other instruments or voices often play sounds that support and enhance the main melody, but the melody itself is the star of the show, the part that you can hum or whistle after the song is over. With this said, not every genre of music uses melody the same way or to the same degree. One thing I love about modern scores for TV shows and movies is that they're much more textural than melodic. Plenty of electronic dance music eschews melody entirely, as does lots of hip-hop. It's really up to you to figure out what kind of piece you're trying to write and whether or not melody might be appropriate for it. For instance, not every piece of music in Severance has a melody, but the ones that do, well, you know. Okay, there are a few more aspects of melody we should talk about now before we get into the historical stuff. We've talked about how melodies are made up of sounds right after each other. These are notes. A note resides in a scale, and a scale is a collection of notes that follow a pattern. Again, I really encourage you to watch our video on scale modes and then practice some scales. They will really, really help you understand the building blocks of melody. First is pitch. So you have a root note and a scale mode. Let's say C harmonic minor. You now have the pitches that you will use to write your melody. From there, you would choose the octave range. Is your melody high or low? A high melody can imply bright and cheerful, but also shrill and alarming. A low melody can be morose, sad, stately, or even dangerous and evil. Rhythm is the next aspect. In a melody, a rhythm is when a note is played or changes, and for how long that note sticks around. The rhythm of a melody is right up there with notes in terms of what gives a melody character. Fast repetition, or movement in a melody, gives a very different impression than slow, flowing movement, and dramatic melodies combine both. Next is the contour. This is the shape we talked about earlier, the rise and fall of the melodic line. Does it generally ascend, descend, or stay flat, or have like an arch shape? There it is again. What is about this shape? So interesting. Now we get to use some fun words. Conjunct motion versus disjunct motion. Conjunct means stepwise, and melodies that use this move primarily by small intervals or steps to adjacent notes within the scale. They tend to be smooth and flowing, like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Disjunct motion means leaping, melodies that move by larger intervals. These create a sense of drama, excitement, or tension. The Star-Spangled Banner is an example. Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Or the beginning of the chorus of Radioactive by Imagine Dragons. A melody will have a range. This is the distance between the lowest and highest notes in a melody. A wider range can contribute to a more dramatic or expansive feel, while a narrower range might feel more intimate. Melodies, generally stay in a small range unless they want to make a big statement. Coldplay's Yellow is an example of a melody that uses jumps throughout the verse for drama, and then a big jump in the chorus for a lift of energy. Lady Gaga's Disease stays in a specific range before it starts to bust out of that in the pre-chorus, and then there's a massive jump into the chorus. It's very dramatic. Next up is phrasing. Melodies are often organized into smaller segments called phrases, much like sentences in a language. These phrases typically have some sense of completion, often ending with a brief pause. Phrases combine to form larger melodic ideas. This is such an important concept, one that we'll see very clearly if you start studying melodies in a piano roll. I'm going to send this over to Editing Jeremy to show you more about this idea real quick.
Hey, it's Editing Jeremy. Hi, it's me, Editing Jeremy. So I want to show you real quick about this song, Lady Gaga's Disease. It has a really, really powerful melody, and it uses all the stuff we've been talking about. It uses conjunct and disjunct motion. It uses questions and answers, and it uses repetition of rhythm. So let's look at it. Here is the verse.
There are no more tears to cry. I heard you begging for life, running out of medicine. You're worse than you've ever been.
So it's really, really easy to see from how we've transcribed it into the piano roll here that we have a repetition of structure. This little structure here, this rhythm, ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba. You can remove all of the notes from it and still get repetition, and that's the rhythm repetition that we have to think about. And then we have the way that the notes move up and down. So in the beginning of the phrase, they stick around, and then they do a little movement at the end. They stick around, and then we have a slight more movement at the end. Stick around, movement, stick around, a little bit more movement. So repetition and variation. And then we have a question being asked going up, and a question being answered going down. Up, question, down, answer. So that's the first verse. Then we go into verse 2, and you can see already from our clip here that there's more repetition. And we also get something very interesting. All this was very, very stepwise in conjunct meaning, so everything is like one note away. I'm using the scale mode here, so you can see notes that are next to each other in the scale. We don't have anything that's not just right next to itself, so we're going very stepwise. And then here, immediately, we get hit with a full octave jump.
Screaming for me, baby, like you're gonna die. Poison on the inside, I could be an antidote tonight.
So that's our structure. It's small structures spun out multiple times. This is a structure repeated. This little thing is a structure repeated. Da 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 da. This is sort of a question. We end up on a perfect fifth, which again is a pretty stable note, but not as stable as what we end up with here at the end.
Poison on the inside, I can be an antidote tonight.
This is the most powerful resolution we've got in the whole melody, where she hits B. This track is in B, sort of a Phrygian dominant. This is full resolution right here with her main voice. These are backup vocals, so they don't quite hit as well, but just all the way down, 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 down till we hit that resolution down there. It's really, really powerful. And again, here we have an example of rhythmic structures being spun out over and over again, and then the slight variations within. And then we get to the chorus.
I can play the doctor, I can cure your disease. If you were a sinner, I could make you believe. Lay you down like 1, 2, 3, eyes roll back in ecstasy. I can smell your sickness, I can cure your disease.
Before we get into the repetitive structures that we can see, look at how big this jump is. This is the biggest disjunct move we've had so far, from all the way down here in B all the way up here. It's over an octave jump. And that's not easy to do, but it makes a really, really big difference in how we experience the chorus. It just soars up to this high D, and we stay pretty high up there. We have this little dip down in the third part, which is a great place to put variation in your melody or your rhythm after you've had 2 sets of repetition, and then go back to the establishment to finish the phrase. So we have this structure that repeats, going down, down, down to the perfect fifth again, structured down, down, down to the perfect fifth. We have this little almost sea chanty bit right here.
Lay you down like 1, 2, 3, eyes roll back in ecstasy.
And then finally we have our last thing, and I'll tell you what I expected her to do, and I'm surprised she didn't.
I can smell your sickness, I can cure your disease.
So far, we haven't really resolved any of our melodies very strongly, except for at the very end
Go tonight.
of verse 1B. But here at the end, she had an opportunity to go up to the B.
Sickness, I can cure your disease.
So that would have been a full resolution. But instead, she went down to that F sharp,
Sickness, I can cure your disease.
which has a bit more of a resigned feel, like she's sort of like giving up the energy of the chorus into the next section as opposed to like letting it soar. It's a bold choice, and it's not one I would have done, but I'm not Lady Gaga. So yeah, I'm just the crow. What do I know about singing? I sound like this. That's what I sound like. That's my example of how Lady Gaga's Disease is a really, really good study for melody in the modern age, and that is a series of little looks like a Mario level. It's a series of repetitive structures that have upwards and downwards motion, mostly conjunct, until she wants to make a bolder statement, and then we go up here to the cloud world for the chorus. So yeah, that's it from me. That's it for me from the editing, Jeremy. I'll see you soon, maybe. I don't know. Okay, bye.
Okay, we've gotten a look at how melody is structured, at least on paper. Let's take a quick trip through history to talk about the known origins of melody and how it developed over time. Then we'll wrap up with some tips for you for writing a better melody. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. So, as you might expect, the concept of melody is as old as music itself. Drumming, chanting, and simple wind instruments, the core of early music, presented the idea of a recognizable sequence of pitches since the moment we were able to use those parts of our body to do that stuff. The earliest known written melody is the Hurrian hymn number 6, discovered on a clay tablet excavated from the ancient Amorite Canaanite city of Ugarit, which is modern-day Syria, in the 1950s. It dates back to approximately 1400 BCE, making it over 3,400 years old. The tablet contains both the lyrics of the hymn, dedicated to Nikal, an ancient Near Eastern goddess of orchards, and instructions for a singer, accompanied by a 9-stringed instrument, a type of harp or lyre. While there were other fragmentary musical texts found at Urgerit, the Hurrian hymn number 6 is the most complete and therefore the most reconstructible. However, it's important to note a couple things. Music certainly existed long before 1400 BCE. Archaeological discoveries of ancient flutes and other instruments date back tens of thousands of years. However, these finds didn't come with explicit musical notation, so we can only speculate about the melodies played on them. The Hurrian hymn is significant because it provides us with actual written musical instructions. Interpretations of this, however, are debated. While the tablet provides notation, its interpretation of how the music would have sounded precisely are still subjects of scholarly debate. Different musicologists have offered various transcriptions and performances based on their understanding of this ancient notation system. Like this, check it out. Another notable ancient melody, often cited as the oldest complete surviving musical composition, is the Sikolos epitaph. This ancient Greek tune, including lyrics and musical notation, was found engraved on a tombstone in Turkey and dates between the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. While it's complete and its transcription is less controversial than the Hurrian hymn, it is significantly younger. So, while we have archaeological evidence of musical instruments from much earlier periods, the Hurrian hymn number 6 holds the distinction of being the earliest known melody with actual notated music that has survived to this present day. Okay, so we've mentioned chanting already, and one of the most well-known forms of chanting is plain chant, also known as Gregorian chant. Chanting as a musical expression existed well before Christian plain chant. Let's be clear. It's widely accepted that ancient Jewish worship significantly influenced early Christian ritual and chant. But obviously, cultures and religions outside Judaism and Christianity were using chant for religious and cultural expression. So plain chant is likely as old as Christianity itself, but the organized collection and codification of plain chant, particularly what we recognize as Gregorian chant, primarily developed in Western and Central Europe during the 8th and 9th centuries AD. Melodically, plain chant is so well known, it's almost cliche, and is easily parodied, like in this album Chant Mania by the Benzedrine monks of Santo Domenica. It's monophonic in nature, meaning there's always only one single monophonic line that one or more voices are singing in unison. It's almost always sung a cappella without instrumental accompaniment to make the focus the human voice and the sacred text. It didn't use major or minor scales, but instead what are called church modes. And today, we know those as Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, and Mixolydian, which are 4 of my personal favorite scale modes to write in. They're free rhythm, or non-metrical. They don't use a time signature like modern music, which means that the rhythm is flexible and allows the melody to unfold like spoken prose, emphasizing the meaning of the words. It uses conjunct or stepwise motion, with a limited range, often staying with an octave or less, which makes it easier to sing for a congregation or monastic choir. As music evolved, multiple melodic lines began to be interwoven, leading to what's known as polyphony. Initially, these lines often embellished or ran parallel to the main melody, for example, in organum. Oftentimes, composers developed more complex counterpoint, where independent melodies interacted harmonically. Counterpoint is a fundamental concept in music theory that refers to the relationship between 2 or more independent melodic lines that are sounding simultaneously. While these lines are distinct and maintain their own melodic character, they are often harmonically independent, meaning they create a coherent and pleasing harmony when combined. The term counterpoint comes from the Latin punctus contra punctum, which also means note against note. Punctus contra punctum, contrapunctum, contrapoints? We're back here again. The agenda. Perotin was a composer of the Notre Dame school and a master of organum, which was an early form of counterpoint. He would often take what was called a cantus firmus, or a pre-existing plain chant melody, and stretch it out in very long sustained notes for the lowest voice, like the tenor. And then above that, he would compose these fast-moving, elaborate, and flowing higher points for the remaining 3 voices. You can hear this super clearly in his piece, Viderunt Omnis. Machado came around a few hundred years later and was a leading composer of the Ars Nova in the 14th century. Ars Nova, or New Style, was a musical style which flourished in France during the Latin Middle Ages. In the Kyrie of his piece Messe de Notre Dame, you can hear him at work. These are at least 4 voices, all moving independently in rhythm and melody, but each contributing to the others and to the piece as a whole. The resolution of all the voices in the cadence feels especially important after the complex counterpoint of the main melodic sections. The Baroque era, roughly 1600 to 1750, saw a significant evolution in melodic writing, largely influenced by the establishment of the major-minor tonal system and a desire for greater emotional expression and dramatic impact. This era saw composers like Bach and Handel put emphasis on what could be called the doctrine of affections, or emphasis on emotional expression. Composers aim to evoke specific emotions, or affections, like joy, sadness, anger, triumph, happy, horny, bursting with rage. We've got a million different ways to begin. Melodies were crafted to convey these feelings, often with distinct melodic figures or patterns associated with particular emotions. There are a few techniques that Baroque composers used to achieve this. For instance, like Fortspielung, or the continuous spinning out of a melodic idea, which was different than the more balanced and symmetrical phrases of the classical era. It meant that melody tended to unfold without clear breaks or regular phrases, and often building on smaller motivic cells that are repeated and sequenced, which means repeated at a higher or lower pitch and varied. This creates a sense of perpetual motion and drive. They also embraced ornamentation, which included things like trills, and I'm sure all of you have heard a Baroque trill, especially one that leads to a cadence or resolution. There was also basso continuo, which involved a strong, active bass line played by an instrument like a cello or a bassoon that provided the harmonic foundation, and a chordal instrument like a harpsichord or a lute that improvised the harmonies above it. The melody, often in the highest voice, and the bass line became the 2 most important lines, creating a clear top and bottom structural framework. Hey, should we make like a top and bottom joke here?
No.
I know. But like my thing is kind of like to add inappropriate humor in places in these things.
No.
Do you think we could get away with something like, oh, those Baroque composers really knew how to switch it up?
No.
You know, top and bottom?
No.
Oh, hey, wait, hold on, I got it.
No.
Why did the conductor say Handel was a power bottom? Because he laid down such strong basso continuo. Anything? I thought it was funny.
No.
Oh well, you think about that.
No.
J.S. Bach's Air on the G string is perhaps one of the most widely recognized and beloved melodies from the Baroque era. It's serene, flowing, and deeply expressive with a lyrical quality. While many Baroque melodies are complex and virtuosic, this air is relatively simple, flowing, and beautiful. It embodies the Fortspielung concept with continuous, smoothly unfolding melodic lines. The classical era, from around 1750 to 1820, moved away from the continuous, complex, and ornamented melodies of the Baroque and towards clarity, balance, and elegance. Maybe the most defining characteristic was how they used symmetry and periodicity, or question and answer phrases. The melodies are typically structured in clear, balanced phrases, often of 2 or 4 measures, which combine to form larger units or periods. These phrases often have a question and answer, or antecedent-consequent relationship, where an opening phrase feels incomplete and is then answered by a more conclusive phrase. The question can be achieved by ending the phrase on a note that has more tension with the underlying scale mode, instead of one of the notes that feels more stable. A root note, or tonic note, feels like a definitive answer, while the 2nd, 4th, or 7th will feel incomplete, like a question being asked.
Here's the question. And we stop there. It's blatantly in the middle of a thought. Technically, this is called a half cadence. Then we get the answer. And so the answer brings the melody down to the home note or tonic, which sounds very stable and conclusive. We call this kind of strong ending a perfect, authentic cadence.
We talk about this in our musical phrasing video too, so check that one out if you haven't. The classical melodies became highly vocal in nature with a lyrical or singable quality. They still use counterpoint, but the predominant texture became oh boy, I read that as homophobic. It's homophonic, but oh my God. Yeah, I read that as homophobic and I was like, why do melodies hate gay people? We're just vibing. Let's try to ball with my bros. Anyways, homophonic means a clear, prominent melody was supported by a subordinate chordal arrangement. This allowed the melody to stand out and be easily heard, unlike the dense polyphony of Baroque works. Guess it was Baroque, and that's why they fixed it. Composers of this time were masters of developing themes. They would present a short, memorable melodic idea, a motive, and then develop it through repetition, variation, fragmentation, and sequence, often moving through different keys. Nowhere is this more prominent than in arguably the most famous and recognizable melodies in all of classical music, and that is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik. The opening theme is highly symmetrical and balanced, consisting of clear, short phrases. It features conjunct or stepwise motion with occasional small leaps, contributing to a smooth, flowing feel. It also has a clear, decisive ending to the melody, or cadence, when it hits the harmonic resting points we talked about earlier, providing a strong sense of articulation and structure. The Romantic era was up next, and honestly, I'm getting super tired, and we still have a lot to talk about with melody tips. So all I'm going to say here is that the Romantic era composers were naughty freaks who wanted to break a bunch of rules set up by the previous eras. They messed around with phrasing and broke out of the 4, 8, and 16 bar rules we set before. They started using more complex melodic figures, wider melodic ranges, more dramatic leaps, and increased chromaticism to convey intense feelings.
Hey, that's my favorite Lady Gaga album.
No, you're thinking of chromatica.
No.
Chromaticism is when you play all the notes in between the notes in the scale mode you're in. It's like weird and a little off-putting and dramatic and shit. Also, really? You like that album? One interesting thing about the Romantic era was the heavy influence of folk music. There was already a brewing nationalism in composition in the classical era, but the Romantic era saw it flourish even more. And the reason I bring this up is because the characteristics of folk melody that the Romantic era composers sought to employ can be directly compared to how modern songwriters also aim to write melodies. First up, the emphasis on melodic simplicity and catchiness. Folk melodies by nature are often simple, direct, and highly memorable because they were transmitted orally and meant to be easily learned and sung by communities. The singability was a key attraction for Romantic composers seeking to connect with broader audiences and express national character. Folk melodies also have an emotional directness and relatability. Folk music often told the stories of everyday life, love, hardship, and celebration, conveying raw, authentic human emotions. Romantic composers embraced this emotional directness, using melodies to invoke specific feelings without the need for complex theoretical understanding from the listener. Pop music is fundamentally about relatability and emotional connection. Its melodies are designed to tap into universal feelings, whether joy, sadness, love, or angst, happiness, horniness. The direct emotional appeal of folk-influenced romantic melodies set a precedent for music that spoke directly to the heart, which is a hallmark of pop music. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, I don't like pop music and I don't care about how it uses melody, that's fine, but I think you're wrong. Pop music isn't just Charlie or Sabrina or that evil twink Troy. Pop is short for popular, as in the Latin word populus or people. It's music prevalent among the general public, and whether or not you know it, you've consumed more pop music than any other type of music just by its virtue of being everywhere. If you want to relate to people with your music, it's important to understand how people relate to music. Don't be a dildo. Folk music has a direct connection to blues, jazz, country, and by extension, rock music. And I'm assuming all of us probably have some love for some category of those genres. I'm not going to dig into the melodic construction of any of that, because if we did, we'd be here all day, and I have Fox things to do. So let's move on to some ways you can think about writing your own melody. Stop that right fucking now. All right, so writing a melody. If you already have a chord progression and you're trying to write something over that, stay away from the piano roll at first. Instead, try just looping the chord progression and singing over it. You don't have to be a good singer. God knows Jeremy isn't. But your voice is the easiest thing for you to use to come up with a natural melody. You'll instinctively reach for a combination of rhythms and note motion that you wouldn't if you just used the piano roll. You can do this with whatever instrument you feel comfortable with. If it's your voice, great. If it's a little keyboard app on your phone, great. Loop the chords, play around, and when you think you have something, record it as audio or MIDI. Try playing it back and seeing if it sounds right, or not quite there. Listen to your gut. You've heard melodies your whole life and unconsciously absorbed a lot of information about what kind of melodies work for you and what don't. Start with a small phrase, then repeat it and add some variation. Melodies are about repetitive structures, rhythms with certain types of directional motion to the notes. The notes that we pick and their relationship to the scale we're in dictate the tension and release of our melody. Experiment with different notes and small phrases you're repeating. Try moving up or down, or even sometimes staying the same, and see how it feels. This isn't about right or wrong, it's about feeling. This does require you to have some knowledge of scale modes, so please pick a couple scales and get to know them. We often suggest to students to think of the melodies like you're singing them, whether you are or not. And that's because a good melody has breaks in it. It has places where someone singing would take a breath. Since melody has been linked to the human voice since inception, having phrases with a combination of action and resting is really important. Again, try singing your melody and really pay attention to how it feels. Do you naturally want to take a break somewhere? Do you want to tie notes together that maybe you didn't in your piano roll version? Do you want to repeat notes instead of using motion? All of these things can be revealed when you try to attack the problem with a real-world instrument instead of a DAW's piano roll at first. Try asking a question and then answering. A common melodic structure is question and answer. Sing a phrase that feels like it's asking a question. It might feel unresolved. Then sing another phrase that feels like it's answering or resolving it. Question phrases can be implied by ending going up to a note as opposed to down or staying on the same note, as well as ending on a note that has some underlying tension with a chord or scale mode. Certain notes in the scale want to resolve, while others have less need to do so. Check out my video on scale modes for more information on that. Answer phrases can be implied by moving down to the final note or ending on a note that has a strong gravity compared to the scale mode. The tonic or root note is the main one you'll want to reach for here, but you can answer a phrase on the third or the fifth, though it won't be quite as strong as ending on the root. You could also start with the rhythm. Don't play any notes at all, just bang out a MIDI sequence on your keyboard into a loop. Then try moving the events around to construct motifs with suggestions we've made above. Rhythm is the foundation of all of this, so sometimes it's not a bad place to start. Finally, and I cannot say this enough, study music that you like. Sing along with melodies in songs that you like. Play along with melodies and songs that you like. Pay attention to the movement and repetition in the melodic lines. Does it go up or does it go down? Does it jump or use stepwise movement? How do the ends of phrases work? What notes do they use for questions and answers? For us, we've learned about this by playing the piano along with music we liked, and that's still the suggestion we will give to anybody trying to get a better understanding of melody. It really doesn't matter what instrument you use, as long as you work to figure out the notes and rhythm of the melody. If you can play a MIDI keyboard into your DAW and then see the melody you've transcribed in the piano roll, you'll start to very quickly recognize patterns and shapes that fall into the categories of melodies that we've talked about in this video. There really is no substitution for understanding music than playing and listening with intent to music. Give yourself a couple hours a week to get deeper into the music you like so that you can understand what makes it tick. Otherwise, you're kind of expecting to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel before even knowing how to draw a bunny. You have to draw the bunny. Draw the fucking bunny. I hope this was useful information for y'all. I learned a lot about how to talk about melodies with my students going forward, and hopefully some of them will watch this video and learn too. Until we meet again, it's been Cooler Jeremy, and remember, Shawty's like a melody in my head that I can't keep out. Got me singing like na 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 every day. Okay, bye.
Shawty's like a melody in my head that I can't keep out. Got me singing like na 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 every day. It's like my eyeballs stuck on replay. Remember the first time we met? You was at the mall with your friend. I was scared to approach you, but you will give me